The Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
People love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone. Here's Roger Stone.
Welcome. You are now entering the Stone Zone. They once said that Buenos Aires was the Paris of South America. Argentina was once one of the most successful and wealthy democracies in this side of the world. Over time, unfortunately, like many great capitalist-based societies, Argentina was destroyed by Juan Perón. Juan Perón was a political mastermind, his political career guided by his famous wife, Evita Perón. It had both a right and left wing, and it dominated that nation's politics. It did mobilize the poorer voters who voted so the rich could continue to eat all the cake, but that's a different story. Ultimately, Peronism morphed into Kirchnerism with back-to-back presidents. First of all, Nestor Kirchner, then his horrific wife, Cristina Kirchner. This is like Casey DeSantis on steroids. They were robber barons that suppressed freedom, that sought to limit free speech, that limited the markets, that also they embraced the police state. They destroyed the economy. And people thought that was the wave of the future for Argentina. Several years ago, I met a rather unorthodox and eccentric economist and thinker named Javier Milei. We met through Twitter direct messages. We became very good friends. And I appreciate the fact that he was a devotee of Milton Friedman, that he had widely read the writings of William F. Buckley Jr., that he was familiar with Ludwig von Mises, and he understood the benefits of free market capitalism and freedom. And he had Elvis-like sideburns, and he campaigned for the presidency with a chainsaw, pledging to take a chainsaw to government spending. He's made good on his word. There have been extraordinary upticks and improvements in Argentina's economy under his new leadership. Of course, the deep state and the left said that the country would fall into chaos. That hasn't happened. If you need any proof of it, look at the recent elections. They had weekends. They had elections days ago. Just yesterday, I believe, Milei's party, La Libertad Avanza, won approximately 41.5% of the vote, particularly strong in the Buenos Aires province, which historically has always been dominated by left-wing Peronism and even the Kirchners. Additionally, Milei's party increased their seats in the lower house from 37 to 64. These were projected by the fake news media, of course, to be close elections that would end up being a rout to prove to the public that people are willing to see Milei through the free market reforms he's bringing to that country. He had scored a big win days ago after meeting with Donald Trump. If you don't know it, folks, the United States is facing a massive beef shortage. I wrote about this. It's at stonecoldtruth.com. I think I also wrote it on Stone Zone. The reason we are, and the reason why a high-quality steak or a very good hamburger could soon be very hard to find and extremely expensive if you can find one, is because of the radical environmental policies that began under Barack Obama and were re-fired by Joe Biden. In the fall of 2025, Americans, just look at the numbers. In 1951, there were 82 million head of steer in the country that were going to be quality beef. Today, that number is 28.2. It is the radical environmental policies combined with a screwworm epidemic in northern Mexico, where we were getting a lot of our premium beef, that create a coming beef shortage. So don't complain if you can't get that burger or that porterhouse or that New York strip. President Trump has recognized this when he met with Argentine President Javier Milei. One of Milei's asks was an increase in the quota of high-quality Argentine beef to the United States, and President Trump granted that request. There are some U.S. cattlemen who are unhappy about that, but unfortunately, they have no solution to the beef shortage. They are already producing at their maximum levels. The herd size is down. The air and water mandates put in place by Joe Biden make it very difficult to bring beef to market. President Trump is fighting every day to do that. And then, of course, this Mexican scandal. Malays reduced inflation in this country from 12% to 2%, as well as actually for the first time having a surplus. So he's actually implemented the strict fiscal conservatism he talks about during the campaign. It hasn't come without turmoil, as it takes him to reverse a nation that was in as bad a situation as Argentina. They had ruined this country the way they're trying to ruin the United States. But Milei was able to negotiate an aid package with President Trump. Trump gave Argentina a $40 billion aid package featuring $20 billion currency swap and a $20 billion debt investment facility. See, Donald Trump stands up for those who stand up for freedom. The dictators like Maduro, Xiomara Castro in Honduras, and the current leader of the regime in Cuba, those who've been trafficking in drugs as well as a vile ideology, they will get no quarter from Marco Rubio and Donald Trump, who have made it very clear that Chinese communist-backed communist narco-terrorism in this hemisphere is unacceptable under the Trump doctrine. Milei is like Nayib Bukele in El Salvador. He's a success story, an incredible success story. They have taken what was one of the most dangerous, unstable places in the world, El Salvador, and it is a model of both peace and economic opportunity. They're using cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and other innovative technologies to boost their economy. So I salute my good friend Javier Milei for negotiating a great aid package, for bringing his country back from the brink. And you got to admit, you love this guy's burns. He is very cool. Zoran Mandami continues to lead in the race for mayor, but recent polling, highlighted by my good friend Mayor Rudy Giuliani, actually shows that in a two-person race, it is Republican Curtis Sliwa who runs a stronger race against Mamdani. He still trails, I believe it was by 8 points. At this point, I listened to the debate. I had the high privilege of being on the Larry Kudlow show with Larry Kudlow, and my assessment really was that Andrew Cuomo demonstrated his superior knowledge of government. Zoran Mamdani demonstrated his superior knowledge of politics, artfully dodging and weaving on the issues so as to don't get caught, while Curtis Sliwa demonstrated his superior knowledge of New York and what it needs. I thought it was much better than the second debate. Andrew Cuomo is just endlessly annoying to me. It wasn't long ago that he said, as I recall it, if you believe in the right to bear arms or you oppose abortion, there is no place for you in New York State. You should leave. Some voices are now saying to Republicans, this is the person you should vote for. Based on what? That he's Mario Cuomo's son? Well, most of us didn't care for Mario either. He just seems to me like a man running because there's no other office to run for, and because he had excess funds left over from his gubernatorial days. This is a man who was forced to resign in the face of impeachment over claims that he'd inappropriately groped women. The Democrat Party rejected him at the primary. That was his first and only chance to become mayor. Instead, of course, they gravitated to the most radical Democrat candidate in New York City history, Zoran Mamdani. Even Kathy Hochul was brought to heel. The current governor, who's thought generally speaking to be somewhat more mainstream than Mamdani, was forced to pay homage to the progressive wing of the party because they are in the catbird seat. Right now, Chuck Schumer is sweating wherever he is because if the bartender from the Bronx runs against him, he's toast, and he knows it. And Governor Hochul, who some thought would be a kind of a governor on the mayor because you have to have state money to do anything. And governors like Nelson Rockefeller thwarted John Lindsay. Governors have often thwarted mayoral ambitions and policies. That's not going to happen. Kathy Hochul knows to survive a challenge to her own renomination, she's going to have the stamp of approval from the progressive Marxist jihadi machine in New York City. But it was really AOC who I thought was who went completely insane at one of their rallies. I've never quite seen anything like this. I love the idea of a bartender making videos telling other people that they're stupid. Let's roll this.
Was built by the Irish escaping famine, Italians fleeing fascism, Jews escaping Holocaust, Black Americans fleeing slavery and Jim Crow, Latinos seeking a better life, Native people standing for themselves, Asian Americans coming together in Queens, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, in Manhattan, in Staten Island, in this country, in a vision to build the freest, toughest, and greatest city on earth.
Very interesting. Of course, what she fails to point out is that all those people she refers to, all those ethnic groups who made this country great, they're people who came here legally. They may, you see, she kind of misses that part. That was a ridiculous spectacle. But it does demonstrate that Mamdani has the momentum. You can see that it could fill a stadium with cheering, enthusiastic supporters. I'm convinced that a third of those people they're what I call the hope and change voters. They like the vibe. They like the positioning of that Mamdani is somehow challenging the dark money, he's challenging the system. When in fact, my good friend Sam Antar over at White Collar Fraud is absolutely proved that Mamdani's campaign was financed by a bunch of interlocking political action committees, 501c4s, 501c3s, nonprofits, and political parties. The whole thing is a fugazi. It is pasted together. He has more donors in Malibu and Beverly Hills than he does, and Vail and Kennebunkport than he does in New York City. And very few small donors until very late in the race. That's the other tip-off. Once again, it demonstrates the problem for the Democrat Party. Their party is no longer capable of nominating a moderate. When Bill Clinton was able to swoop in and sell himself as a Southern moderate who would bring the party back from radical McGovernism, which had ruined the party brand in the early 70s, there was a constituency for him. There were still moderate Democrats. Try to find a conservative Democrat today. I mean, there are some conservatives who are older and they're still registered as Democrats, but tell me the name of a prominent public conservative Democrat. It literally doesn't exist. The best impression you'll find is John Fetterman. He just seems more like a common sense guy to me than any kind of doctrinaire conservative. And of course, you had the senator from West Virginia, but he couldn't take the crap in the U.S. Senate anymore. He left. This is the new Democrat Party. This is the party of AOC, the party of Jasmine Crockett. This is, ironically, talk about recycling, that pompous old windbag Bernie Sanders. He's back for another round of heavy fundraising. You notice how Bernie used to criticize millionaires and billionaires. Now he only criticizes billionaires. That's because Bernie and his wife became millionaires by quite legally taking media placement fees from his two extremely well-financed but hopeless presidential campaigns. Now, he never disclosed that he was doing that to the donors, but it is a perfect example of the hypocrisy of the left. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Stone Zone. I'll be right back.
This is The Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
It is a great, great person, Roger Stone.
The Stone Zone. This is The Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's The Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
I'm still reeling from that AOC speech. I mean, if this woman's IQ was 1 point lower, you'd have to water her like a plant. There may be an answer here because it's very hard for me to just accept the fact that this long after 9/11, we're about to elect a mayor who embraces the ideology of those who were told attack the World Trade Center that day. This is the once great Democrat Party of John Kennedy and Harry Truman no longer has an anti-communist wing. There's been a mass exodus and a deep change in the demographics in New York City. Less than a third of voters today are Catholic. Catholics once dominated the New York Democrat primary. 27% of the people are white. 23% of voters are Hispanic. There's been massive changes in the makeup of the city. But I don't think that foreign-born hostiles who are openly anti-American, like Ilhan Omar or Zoran Mamdani, both of whom there's evidence of which lied on their forms to enter the country and become a citizen, can run for office and wield power to destroy our country. I think it's ridiculous. The founding fathers would never have stood for this. House Republicans may have a solution that would deport the likes of Mamdani and Omar so they would not have to deal with them anymore. Congressman Randy Fine is demanding the feds review every naturalization of the past 30 years, starting with Mamdani. Fine says, I just think we need to take a hard look at how these folks became citizens, and if there is any fraud or any violation of the rules, we need to denaturalize and deport. There is a legal argument to be made that if you have advocated for the violent overthrow of the U.S. government, that alone would make you ineligible to enter the country and become a citizen. I know there's a lot of us. I certainly am in this group. We're very, very concerned about, as the president calls them, the enemy within. People who've come to this country become citizens only to try to destroy it. Congressman Fine is being joined by Congressman Andy Ogles of Tennessee, who has pushed for a DOJ investigation of Zoran Mamdani specifically. Ogles believes that Mamdani lied on his sworn statement as he became a naturalized citizen back in 2018. That's when he first joined the Democrat Socialists of America, a known Communist Front organization. It's interesting, if you go back and look at old videos, Mamdani had a very thick accent. Must have taken a lot of training and practice to lose that accent, but he's done. So I wonder whether he is a confection like Barack Obama, created by a powerful Marxist clique of globalists in the background pulling the strings and writing the checks. Sam Antar has proven that the checks are coming from the radical left. I'm Roger Stone. We're in the Stone Zone. We'll talk about more on the other side.
This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
And we're back in the Stone Zone. There's very good news recently for both the United States and bad news for the Communist Chinese Party. When in a shocking, I'm not sure we can call it, in a coup in Japan, in their parliament, where the Liberal Democratic Party, which despite its name is the more conservative of the two parties, partnered with the Libertarian-oriented Innovation Party to elect a new woman prime minister who is who is pro-Western, who's pro-U.S., who is pro-Trump. And who is opposed to illegal immigration in Japan, having seen what it's done to other nations. She also takes a hard line against enormous pressure from the Communist Chinese. It was thought that the Communist Chinese has infiltrated Japan's current left-wing government. You'll recall that Donald Trump was great friends with former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated by these very pro-Chinese dark left forces when he was running in the election there. President Trump scheduled now to meet with Prime Minister Takachi. She's not only a libertarian and a conservative, She is also a heavy metal drummer, as well as being the youngest prime minister and the first prime minister for the country. This is very, very good news for the United States. China is rich in both gold reserves and they have access, it's a long story, but they have access to rare earth minerals. The president has laid down the gauntlet with the Chinese on rare earth minerals. The Communist Chinese were going around the world, South America, Central America, Asia, Eastern Europe, buying up control of all of these essential rare earth minerals that we need to make things like batteries and all kinds of other products. The idea was to get a stranglehold on that market. And of course, the United States wasn't even competing. The president announced a major initiative to get competitive and to take back these markets. Vietnam, for example, has an enormous rare earth mineral component that the Chinese do not control. And again, the Japanese also have these rights. So it's very good news. President Trump also closed deals with several other Asian companies, which really puts pressure on President Xi Jinping. Shortly after his trade talks, Trump announced the closed deals with Malaysia and Cambodia, and it also came to terms on trade pacts with Thailand as well as Vietnam. The four countries, which are part of an 11-member regional trade group known as the Association of South Asian Nations, ASEAN, are offering to give the United States goods and services preferential status in their countries to get access to their markets, as well as increasing purchases of American agricultural products, aircraft, and other entry products. See, Donald Trump always saw trade as a two-way street. He wanted policies that were good for us, but also good for our trading partners. Now we finally have somebody who understands that. These nations also announced that they will cooperate with the Trump administration regarding export controls, economic sanctions, access to these rare earth minerals we spoke about. This meeting with Takachi, who is very definitely an immigration restrictionist and a nationalist, is really good news for the president. He will have friends once again in control in Japan. At the same time, the president announced an extended truce between Thailand and Cambodia. This was only months after President Trump brokered a peace deal between those two countries, showing his diplomatic chops. The president is building goodwill on the continent of Asia, and that's putting Chairman Xi and the Chinese under pressure. The president has understood from the beginning that the real challenge to our country was not Russia. Don't get me wrong, the Russians are not sweethearts. He is a brutal dictator who restricts human rights. But the real danger, those who are infiltrating our society, our businesses, academia, buying up blue chip American brands, the nation that has its own police stations across the United States where they theoretically spy only on their own Chinese nationals who are here in the country, but in fact they're spying on us. For those who think that Cuba stopped posing a danger to this country when they lost their heavy Soviet subsidization, don't understand the Chinese have really stepped into that brutal rogue nation and taken the place of the Chinese. Cuba is the largest spy station probably in this hemisphere, spying on America with all kinds of sophisticated weaponry. Joe Biden didn't understand this, or more precisely, perhaps all those big payments he got from China to his son and other members of his family caused him to look in the other direction. This is what I think is so great about Marco Rubio and Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard. The foreign policy team here understands that the dangers to this country are communism in this hemisphere and communism in Asia, as well as communism in Eastern Europe. But don't tell me the war in Ukraine is about democracy, because Zelensky hasn't had an election in years. He keeps suspending them. Why? Well, because he knows that he would lose. And he can't even account for the hundreds of billions of dollars that we've already sent him. Now, it is true that much of that spending gets cycled back to the United States to go into the pockets of giant defense contractors who are then shipping those weapons to Ukraine. But it's time for this grift to end. We would never be in this war situation if Joe Biden and his State Department did not try to force Ukraine into NATO. You see, when East and West Germany were reunified and the Russians acquiesced in that, we in return agreed to the Russians that we would not push Ukraine on their border into NATO. They found that threatening. I'll tell you what they find more threatening: the idea of NATO-owned but U.S.-financed missiles on the ground in Ukraine pointed at Mother Russia. How is that different than the way President John F. Kennedy felt when the Russians mounted offensive missiles in Cuba in 1962? And thanks to the reporting, interestingly, of Max Blumenthal, son of Sidney Blumenthal, one of the master architects of the Russian collusion hoax, whose name rarely comes up, but he is the eminence Greece to Hillary Clinton. He is the dark master of the entire Russian collusion hoax and Hillary's handling of it. His son Max is a left progressive but basically honest reporter who's demonstrated that the silos in which they drop these missiles are already built in Ukraine, and NATO has paid for them. Meanwhile, the NATO nations who don't want to write bigger checks than the United States to prop up a losing war continue to dither and delay. That's because there's an enormous pot of money coming through the EU that they get to split up, theoretically, for the modernization of their defenses, which is a clever way to say they're going to be stealing most of it. So therefore, it is in their interest to try to stall any real peace deal, as President Donald Trump continues to try to bring the two parties together. We are all obviously disappointed that the president's trip to Budapest, which he hopefully announced, seems to have gotten off the rails. These are delicate negotiations, and Donald Trump will call the meeting when he thinks he has everything lined up and everybody's where he wants them to be. I think this is just conjecture on my part, but I think as he's trying to negotiate this, he has gotten to the point where he has, say, Putin where he needs him, and then he goes to Zelensky. Once he gets Zelensky on board, he finds out that Putin is no longer on board, has new demands. This is a conjecture on my part, but he is the consummate deal maker. I've read The Art of the Deal. I was working for him when he published it. And I think that he continues to be hopeful. He plays all kinds of games. I mean, look, when the president said just randomly in a tweet, maybe I'll just give Ukraine anything they want. I'll just give them anything they want. They can bomb anybody they want. That was a tactic. That's not his new position. That's a tactic. He was sending a message to Vladimir Putin that it was time to come to the table and quit screwing around and wrap this up. The president finds the killing, the dying, to be really a problem. Too many people have died in a completely unnecessary war. Joe Biden himself, as president, blurted out very early before this war began that he would have been willing to give the Russians the Donbass in return for a pledge of no war. So that deal could have been made, but it wasn't made because Joe Biden and his friends profit from this war, as do their NATO patrons. It is interesting to watch out. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom, this guy is unbelievable. He's got great hair. It's the only thing you can actually say. They've got a couple presidential candidates here who are real beauties. J.B. Pritzker. I met this guy on the corner of 31st, 32nd, and 33rd Street. This guy is so fat he's got his own zip code. And this is true. He's a billionaire who stormed his way, bought the governorship in Illinois. He has weaponized the system in Chicago, where he teamed up with Mayor Brandon Johnson, and they ordered the Chicago Police Department not to come to the assistance of ICE agents who may be under attack or endangered by illegal immigrants, for which I believe J.B. Pritzker and Brandon Johnson will ultimately have legal liability if any of those ICE agents are injured or killed. That's how desperate they are to make their political points. I watched J.B. Pritzker on TV try to explain why the statistics that show that Chicago is indeed the murder capital of the world aren't true. I mean, he says they're not true because he says so. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. And then you have Gavin Newsom, who really has to reinvent himself. So immediately after the election, after Trump was elected, He started a new podcast, and suddenly he's got guests like Steve Bannon and others on the right. It looked like he was going to try to develop some new centrist sensibility. Now his platform is completely and totally, I hate Donald Trump. He cannot talk about his record, otherwise the question will be kind of like Michael Dukakis when he ran for president. Will Gavin Newsom do for America what he's done for California? California is the world's biggest open sewer. They've taken what was a once beautiful country, and it is awash with vagrants, with criminals, with drug addiction, with homelessness, with horrific crime rates, with oppressively heavy taxes. He is a failure as a governor, but it's a one-party state. And although Donald Trump performed much, much better there in the most recent election than he had previously, Gavin Newsom somehow feels anointed. Now, he is a Getty. He has enormous personal wealth, very storied and very colorful history with he and his wife, and his path to the mayor's office first, and then his path to the governorship. I don't think that he makes it, frankly. He may even not be radical enough for their party, but his problem is quite obviously Kamala Harris. Now, she said late Friday she was not done yet. This is very, very bad news from Gavin Newsom. Why? Well, first of all, they suck out of the same well. That well of donors, that well of voters in California, they share a common political base. That will not work for the governor. Kamala Harris just spent millions and millions and millions of borrowed money advertising herself. Even the polling among Democrat primary voters showed that they continue, these are the most radical active Democrats, they continue to have a positive view of her. And most of the objective polling I've seen shows that if she ran, she would lead the field. I think she sidestepped a giant mistake. She thought very hard about running for governor. She never really wanted to be governor. She wants to be president. This is a mistake that Richard Nixon made in 1962, and he lost because he never really wanted to be governor. It had the inadvertent benefit of keeping him out of the line of fire in 1964 after John Kennedy was killed and Lyndon Johnson, who nobody was going to beat, became the nominee. That was a race that Nixon wanted to pass up, and he did. He had hoped to sit it out in the governor's mansion in Sacramento, but he ended up sitting it out at a law firm in New York City, and he would still go on to become president of the United States in the second greatest political comeback in American political history. That moniker belonging to one Donald John Trump of New York, who most improbably staged the single greatest comeback in American history, and now has set about bringing America a golden age of peace, prosperity, security, justice, and law and order. You're listening to this Roger Stone on The Roger Stone Show. We'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
And he's a great, great person, Roger Stone.
The Stone Zone. This is the Stone Zone. Now, get in the zone. It's the Stone Zone.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone. Where's Roger Stone?
Here's Roger Stone.
And you're back in the Stone Zone. Now, here's a story that doesn't surprise me. Politico has a reporter who's being accused of being a spy for the Chinese. Politico, just to clear this up, is not a journalistic outpost or an attempt at fair, reasonable. It's a propaganda front for the radical left. Virtually everything they write is either wrong, incorrect, or badly tilted against anything that has to do with Republicans, Donald Trump, or making America great again. Candidly, I don't get my news from Politico for the same reason I don't eat out of the toilet. But it turns out that a Politico reporter stationed in Brussels to cover the European Union is now being accused by European intelligence services of using his position to target government bureaucrats in Brussels. The reporter allegedly used sexual advances, commonly referred to as honeypotting, in an attempt to influence officials and gain intelligence from them on behalf of the Chinese. It should come to no surprise at all that the fake news would be a great place for a Chinese spy to come in and set up shop. These entities hate America anyway. They love DEI, so they will roll out the red carpet in the name of so-called diversity. You say you're from China, they say no problem. It would be racist and bigoted to have any suspicions about this reporter. So go ahead, have access to the world's most powerful people. Wear our credentials and get in with all the people you've been told to spy on. Just another reason why we need to ignore the fake news altogether and look at alternative sources of news, like terrestrial radio and the internet. Just another reason to recognize that the big television networks, the famous newspapers, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the reporters from both of those publications got Pulitzer Prizes for their incredible investigative reporting on the Russian collusion hoax that we now know was a total and complete fraud. Should those reporters not give back those prizes? I think they should. They are so completely exposed that it is extraordinary. Now you see, according to unpublished notes regarding Mike Pence, he was called a wimp, evidently, several times in a phone call with President Trump in 2021, actually on January 6th. These notes are compiled and will be released in a book by ABC's Jonathan Karl, certainly no Trump supporter or backer. Is entitled Retribution, Donald Trump for the Campaign That Changed America. The only retribution that I see are the attempts by Donald Trump and his, presumably his Justice Department, to hold those responsible for the gross violations of U.S. law and the Constitution that involved the Russian collusion hoax, the 2 phony impeachments, the fake documents case, which they raided his home in Mar-a-Lago, the tsunami of lawfare against him in New York and in New York County, in 3 different courtrooms, the coordination with prosecutors in Georgia and Nevada and Arizona to destroy him, and yet, through divine intervention and sheer guts and unbridled energy, Donald Trump refused to give up the dream that he would return to make America great again. And he beat these people, and now he's exposing their crimes. The left screams, this is retribution, this is all based on revenge. No, if there is evidence against you, as there is, I believe, in the case of Letitia James or Adam Schiff or former FBI Director James Comey, you should be prosecuted. It's not about revenge and retribution. It's about accountability and justice. And we pray for that every single day. Thank you for joining us today on the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.